Hello, welcome along to another Weatherquest farming forecast. Now, we've talked about this several times. Zoe in particular was highlighting this last week. We're getting a lot of calls from our farmers with concerns about how wet this autumn could be. They don't want to see a repeat of last year, of course, which was incredibly wet. Every single day, just didn't really stop raining, and so the ground never really had a chance to dry out. Well, this map here shows how dry it's been so far this September. In fact, for East Anglia as a whole, we've only seen about 6 millimetres of rain so far this month, so it's been very dry so far. This map here shows the days since it last rained at each of these weather stations. These white circles here, they're all different weather stations around the UK. And for many places, it's been quite a while since we saw some rain, particularly across parts of the East Midlands and actually into East Anglia. Now you notice the little white pocket here where it says 0 and 1. That's actually because we had a bit of dew from the fog and so forth over the last few days. So that's actually been registered in some of the rain gauges here, but actually not really proper rain. But for many places here, it's been a good 2 to 3 weeks without any rain in this part of the world. Obviously not quite as dry the further north and west you are, where we have seen quite a bit of rain over the last few days at least. But yeah, as I say, for some, it's been a good 3 weeks since we had any measurable rain, really. So we are expecting that to change this week, and it will start a spell of unsettled weather. As to whether it will be as extreme as last year, well, that's still yet to be determined, and that is primarily to do with what's happening elsewhere in the world at the moment. It's been a very active season in the Atlantic for tropical systems, that's hurricanes as well. And right now, the one that we're keeping a close eye on here is Hurricane Teddy. It is gradually going through the process of changing from what was a very strong hurricane to a more normal area of low pressure, if you like, as it moves out of the warm waters of the tropics into the cooler waters further north in the Atlantic. It loses its tropical characteristics, but it then does start to interact with the jet stream. Now bear in mind, hurricanes here, they are very tight and they carry a lot of warm air with them. And when that gets brought northwards, it can play sorts of havoc with the jet stream as well, as you'll see. So over here then, Teddy is roughly in this area. Remember, the jet stream is above hurricane level. It's got a lot of warm air, and as it's pumping all this warm air up the western side of the North Atlantic, what's going to happen over the next day or so is the jet stream is going to buckle northwards, developing this ridge. And as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, it's a bit like a seesaw. When one side goes up on the western side of the Atlantic, the other side comes down. And so we get this trough developing over the UK, which is going to bring in some quite cold air down from the north. So the first proper taste of cool weather, really, so far this autumn. And some of us will be seeing some frost later on this week and into the weekend as well. So everything is linked. Even though Teddy is not affecting the UK directly, its indirect effects is impacting our weather over the next few days and turning things more unsettled. So taking it over the next few days, this is for Wednesday, we've got this cold front pushing southeast across the UK. Now it's a very messy picture on Wednesday. You can see the isobars are relatively slack here, and we've got this rather sharp troughiness to them, indicating a change of wind direction, southwesterly ahead of the front and then northwesterly behind the front. So there's a little bit of uncertainty for Wednesday in particular as to how much rain we could see across parts of East Anglia and the southeast, because we're likely to see an area of low pressure developing here and running out to the North Sea through the day. So things are developing in situ, if you like. Behind it, a brief ridge coming in before the next area of low pressure starts coming in. So running this sequence through, you can see pulses of rain developing across East Anglia and the southeast. There's our area of low pressure developing and running up towards Scandinavia. Now for Thursday, next area of low pressure scooting into southern parts of the UK. Again, some rain, some strong winds potentially with some of that too. Now by Friday, that's clear to the North Sea. We're left with a run of cold Arctic winds coming down from the north, quite brisk northwesterly winds as well. And then into the weekend, we get a glancing blow from this low coming into the extreme southwest, perhaps not quite as widespread as that looked earlier, but the potential for a little bit of rain in that far southwest, perhaps for a time over the weekend. We've also got to keep an eye on this area of low pressure over the North Sea, because that could bring quite a few showers down these eastern coasts, and perhaps even a slightly longer spell of rain getting very close to the coast. So a bit of uncertainty about how far inland that may push. But for many, as you can see here, by the end of Saturday, this is actually a rather weak ridge building in from the west. So for many central western parts of the UK over the weekend, there will be quite a bit of dry weather. So it's unsettled between Wednesday and Friday, but by the weekend, drying out across many western and central parts. The east, though, hanging on to the risk of those showers running down the North Sea. And as I say, there's a small risk we might see a little bit of rain from a very fast-moving area of low pressure down across the extreme southwest on Saturday, perhaps, but still yet to be determined. It's a northerly Never a warm direction at any time of the year, but especially now we're getting on deeper into the autumn. This is the sort of temperatures we could see at night through the weekend. Now, don't take the map too literally. It's just one model output, of course, and it's many days away. But it gives the idea that temperatures could well get below freezing in many parts of Scotland, northern England, and more locally further south. So we're likely to see a bit of frost this weekend. Not unusual, of course, for the time of the year, but especially the further north you happen to be, where we have the lighter winds and the clear skies at night. So as I say, that ridge will build in through the weekend, so we might get something a little bit quieter on Sunday for many of us, perhaps cutting off those showers near the east coast potentially. But on into next week, that ridge doesn't last very long. I mentioned it was weak. It will topple in quite quickly, and that will allow low pressure then to come back in for next week. So a bit of a question mark about how quickly that happens. It does look like we'll get rain coming into western areas, perhaps late in the day on Sunday, as early as that, but perhaps more widely we'll get some rain and showers pushing back in across the UK into next week. High pressure staying well out to the west through much of next week, and there is low pressure scooting around the top of it and then diving southeast across the UK. So we start the week with the lows mainly centred to the northwest. It's possible as the week goes on, the centre of these lows might shift a bit further south, and so the risk perhaps of rain and showers increasing as the week goes on across more southern parts of the UK. But I will stress there's still some uncertainty because of all the tropical activity taking place elsewhere in the Atlantic right now. And as I say, it is a record-breaking year for tropical storms, so perhaps uncertainty is a little bit higher than it would normally be for the time of the year. So looking at our ensemble data here, we've shown you this table many, many times in the past. So this is the chance of getting a dry day at each location around the UK. As you can see, the locations down here on the left-hand side, going forward through the next 4 weeks or so. Where you've got brown, you're most likely to have a dry day, so VH here standing for very high chance. Where you've got the green showing, you're more likely to have a wet day. And you can quite clearly see, actually, after a dry Tuesday, when we're recording this video, there is a strong signal here for many areas to have wet days from Wednesday through to at least Friday at least. Now, by the time we get to Saturday, with that ridge building in from the west, you get a couple of days here, Saturday, Sunday, with the browns coming back in again. So a better chance of dry weather then developing for a couple of days in time for the weekend, unless you happen to be near the east coast. Norwich, for example, here showing up as likely to have some wet weather potentially on Saturday with those showers running down the North Sea. But then quite quickly, by Monday, we're all back pretty much into the green, especially focused across northern and western parts of the UK. But even the further south you come, it's sort of 50-50 here for the likes of East Anglia and South East England on Monday, but we're still getting to the greens ready for Tuesday onwards. So more likely to turn unsettled again for much of the next working week and possibly on into the following weekend as well, and even the beginning of the following week. Now, there are weak signals at this stage that we might see high pressure building in towards the middle of October across southern parts of the UK, and that could perhaps settle things down a little bit more towards mid-October, but it's still a long way off, and at this stage I'm not seeing any prolonged high pressure spells developing. If anything, it's likely to remain quite changeable, where you get low pressure for a few days, maybe 1 or 2 dry days as the ridge builds like we're going to see this weekend, and then the next low pressure comes in after that. So it is pretty much chopping and changing quite a bit over the next few weeks. This gives you an idea as to the type of air that's going to be over the UK, looking at the temperature of the air about a mile above the ground. I've picked Oxford here just as an example, really. The black line here, the dashed line, that's just the climatology or average for the time of the year. All of these lines are different computer models, and the red is just the average of all of those models, basically, and quite a clear signal here for much colder than average conditions to develop as we go through the rest of this week and into the weekend. So daytime temperatures well below normal, and of course, as we've mentioned, the nights will be pretty chilly, especially the further north you are. Now, there is a signal here by the early part of next week, ahead of that next area of low pressure coming in off the Atlantic. We will start to see warm air or milder air returning from the south. So actually temperatures may get closer to normal or even a touch above normal for the beginning of next week. But then again, as the lows move through and we get northerly winds on the backside, we may get some brief shots of slightly cooler air. Now, there's no strong signal either way, really, through the remainder of the sequence here. You can see that red line more or less stays close to the black line there, close to normal, really, for the time of the year. But it will fluctuate. On the leading edge of each low pressure, temperatures will come up, and then on the backside of each low, temperatures will come down again. So a bit of a yo-yo, really, over the next couple of weeks or so by the looks of things. So quite a bit going on, and no doubt some chopping and changing. It's not set in stone by any means for next week onwards. So if you want the site-specific detail, the best way to keep up to date is to speak to our forecasters here at Weatherquest, and we're available every single day, including the weekends, Christmas Day and Easter Day as well, from 6 in the morning through till 6 in the evening. So give us a call and we can give you some information, hopefully give you some advice on the weather side of things going forward in time and give you the latest thoughts as the data continues to come in. So this is the overall pressure pattern then likely through next week, the 28th of September through to the beginning of October. Now the blues here indicating lower than normal pressure, so quite a strong signal over the UK for below average pressure. In other words, the lows are more frequent and deeper than they would normally be for the time of the year. So an unsettled looking pattern across the UK, whereas it's much drier, or at least higher pressure than normal further east across Eastern Europe and Western Russia. And here we've got significantly above average temperatures showing up during this spell as well. And this was the story right the way through last winter. It was always, much of the time, warmer than average across Eastern Europe and Western Russia through last winter. So a very similar setup yet again. But notice with that big area of low pressure overhead coming in with northwesterly winds much of the time, near or below average temperatures across the UK and Western Europe. So no sign of any prolonged heat or anything like that showing up during this time frame. And with low pressure, as you would expect, above average rainfall quite widely across northwestern parts of Europe, whereas the further east you go, the somewhat drier it'll tend to be. Now getting deeper on into October, I mentioned that area of low pressure might slip a bit further south, and that's currently indicated at the moment. So this is the 5th of October onwards, with lower than normal pressure to the south of the UK and high pressure trying to rebuild over the top of it to the north of the UK. So that might shift the focus for the wetter weather a bit further south into Western Europe in particular. But again, still that signal, Eastern Europe, Western Russia, much of Scandinavia for above average temperatures here, very similar to last winter, and still that signal for slightly below average temperatures the further west you are across Western Europe as well. As I say, that focus for the wetter weather may have shifted a bit further south into France, southern Britain, perhaps drying up relative to average in northwestern parts of the UK with higher than normal pressure here, potentially, but still a long way off at this stage. And then for middle of October, notice that blue signal starts to weaken quite a bit. If anything, there are sort of subtle pink and reds showing up here, indicating slightly higher pressure than normal. Now, again, it's a long way out, and given all the things that are going on in the Atlantic right now, I'm not going to take it too literally, but it does try to imply that pressure may be slightly higher than normal during the middle part of October. We've lost the real widespread blues here. In fact, if anything, it's sort of near normal temperatures showing up at the moment. And rainfall-wise, well, near normal, maybe slightly above in a couple of places, but equally slightly below, especially across northwestern parts of the UK as well. So there are just subtle hints, perhaps it may settle down a little bit towards the middle of October. But until then, it is going to be quite often unsettled with some rain and showers from Wednesday onwards this week, with brief ridges giving us some slightly quieter weather through the weekend, but equally some colder nights with that risk of frost as well. We could see some periods of strong winds too. That's something else to bear in mind. Then perhaps becoming a little bit more settled towards southern parts of the UK in mid-October. But again, a long way off, it may change, and we will try our best to keep you updated here on the farming forecast over the next few weeks. As ever, you can keep up to date with the latest day-by-day forecast by following us on social media.